2.5 years ago, we took an old, ugly, outdated mother-in-law unit, renovated it, and turned it into an Airbnb. Now, we had never run an Airbnb before, so as you'll see in this video, we had a lot to learn. But in this video, we'll share the before and after, how much we spent on renovations, and how much we've made in the 2.5 years since we launched it.
So I'm Matt.
And I'm Dawn.
And we're the unretirees. And last year, as I was approaching the traditional retirement age, we knew that we did not want to retire. But we also didn't want to put on hold our dream of living abroad and traveling the world either. So today we live and work as digital expats on the Silver Coast of Portugal. And on this channel, we talk about living abroad, remote work, and travel and adventure over 50. We really would like for you to subscribe to this channel. If you like this video, be sure you click the thumbs up and click the bell notification so that you don't miss a future video.
So before we jump in, you might be wondering, why are we talking about Airbnbs in 2024? After all, don't we know that Airbnbs are crashing and everybody's getting out? Or that current interest rates make it impossible to get a decent return on investment for Airbnbs? Or that restrictions have made it hard, if not impossible, to run Airbnbs in many parts of the country? Or that no one rents Airbnbs anymore? Why are we talking about Airbnbs? Do we know it's not 2021 anymore?
Well, we do, and we've heard all of that, and honestly, a lot of it isn't true. But away from the noise and the clickbait headlines about the sky falling on Airbnbs, we wanted to share our story. Now, we're not experts, but in this video, we're going to share our real-life experience, the ups and the downs of launching our first Airbnb. And if you've got questions, or if you've got a different experience running an Airbnb, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Now, a quick backstory from us. If you've watched our decluttering video, you know some of this already, but we were living in New York City and we decided that it was time to get a place outside of the city. Unfortunately, it felt like everyone who lived in New York City had the same idea at the same time. The real estate market around New York was crazy, like a lot of places in this country. And if you think about the time, this was in 2021. So super low interest rates were still the rule. The pandemic was in its second year and people were going stir crazy in tiny apartments in New York City and wanted space. And it got so competitive. I mean, we had put in 9 offers above asking on places that got outbid. So we just kept going further and further and further outside of the city. And one day we were on our way to see a house in Connecticut. And it went into contract while we were on the way in the car to this house. But we thought, well, we're almost there. Let's just see what else is available.
Yeah, I think a lot of you who are looking for houses at that time can probably relate to our experience. But we did happen to see a house and it had just gone on the market that morning. We were already in the area, so we took a look, and we'd love to tell you it was love at first sight, but it definitely was not. The downstairs was dark. It was very outdated. There were some really weird things going on. There were small closets where you couldn't even fit a regular size hanger. We talked about this in the last video, but there were windows that kind of went nowhere. It really didn't look at first glance like our perfect property.
So that was the downstairs. Now the upstairs, there was a mother-in-law unit, and that mother-in-law unit had its own challenges. I mean, it had a really odd layout. The kitchen was, well, it was old and it was ugly. And there was a washer and dryer that blocked part of the hallway. And we knew it was going to take a lot of work.
But after we went home and thought about it a little bit more, we really started to see some potential in this place. I mean, after all, it was in a phenomenal location close to the beach. There were a lot of wedding venues nearby, and we knew that out-of-town guests were going to need a place to stay. So we started doing some research on Airbnb and AirDNA. And we saw that although there were other rentals in the general area, this property had never been listed, and there weren't even any other properties in that neighborhood that we could look to get an idea if this would work. In fact, as one neighbor said to us, "Who on earth would ever want a vacation here?"
We decided to take the leap and put in an offer, and we were successful at getting this property. Now, this was September of 2021, and we thought, well, we'd spend about $5,000 to paint it and to furnish it, and we thought maybe that would take a month. And then certainly we'd be ready to go on Airbnb.
We were so young and naive back then. We really had no idea what we were about to get into. So there were 5 main things that we needed to do in the mother-in-law unit to get it ready to Airbnb. Now, first of all, we had to update that outdated kitchen. The entire apartment needed to be repainted. We needed to turn a storage area into a dining nook. We also needed to update the small bedroom, and we needed to furnish the entire place.
Let's talk about what we did. So first in the kitchen and the dining nook. So we hired a contractor because there's only some things that we're good at, but not a lot of things. But a contractor to install a new counter, a new sink, new lights, new backsplash, and a new shelf. We did to save money. We saved all the appliances and the cabinetry and the flooring. We did add a little bit more cabinetry to the space where the washer and dryer had been. And then for the dining nook, we had to take some storage units that were in that area and move them out into the basement. And then where those were, we put in some board and batten. Finally, as part of repainting the whole thing, part of this place had cathedral ceilings, which, I mean, we don't want to climb a scaffold and paint those things. So we had to hire somebody else to paint in that area.
So in the bedroom, we repainted the whole thing. We added more board and batten because can you really get enough of board and batten? And we started by taking off the window frames and building custom craftsman style ones. This was a huge mistake, not at all necessary. If you run an Airbnb, have any experience, you're probably laughing at us right now. We're good with it. We learned our lesson. It was a lot of fun, looks great, but never again.
So then we had to furnish the apartment. And you know, if you haven't done this before, you think, well, what's it cost to do some furniture? But it's not just furniture. It's dishes, it's cookware, it's silverware, it's multiple sets of towels, multiple sets of linens, window treatments, television, outdoor cameras, everything like that.
So like a lot of first-time Airbnbers, I had this idea in my head that I was going to curate the most unique space ever. I was going to find one-of-a-kind pieces in vintage shops and on Facebook Marketplace. And we did try that. We drove all over. You were a complete champ about that, by the way. And we did find a few good pieces, but really that was going to take far too long. And we really wanted to get this apartment up and listed. So we ended up going to IKEA, Target, and World Market.
So we finally got it to a point where we thought it was ready to list, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about how much it cost to get to that point. So like I had said, we thought it was going to take $5,000 and 1 month to get this thing ready. Instead, it took 3 months and it cost about $18,000 on renovations and furniture to get it ready, which was obviously a lot more than we expected to spend. And remember, we had no idea if this was going to work. I mean, the property and the neighborhood were completely unproven for short-term rentals on Airbnb. We had no idea if anyone was even going to book it.
So we first listed it in mid-December 2021. Now, we didn't think that we would get a lot of bookings until summer because who wants to spend time at the beach in New England in winter? But we thought if we could get it up on Airbnb in mid-December, we might have an opportunity to get bookings from people who were in from out of town, spending the holidays, visiting family. So we listed it and decided to see what happened.
So before we talk about what happened next, let's just review for a second. We were $18,000 into this project, not knowing if this was going to work, and we were a little bit nervous. Now, it's worth saying that we didn't bet the farm on this. I mean, we weren't facing financial ruin if this didn't rent. We had lowered our housing costs by moving from New York City to Connecticut by half, so that was helpful. So anything we earned on the mother-in-law unit was going to be gravy. We thought maybe we'd make a few $1,000s per year if we were lucky, maybe a few summer bookings, and the rest of the time it will be a nice getaway for friends and family. So it wasn't high financial stakes for us, but we also didn't want to feel like we had made a huge mistake buying this place with this unit that was going to go unused. And again, there was no proof that this property was going to rent or anything in this specific neighborhood was going to rent. And if it didn't rent, it would just sit there empty and vacant and unused for most of the year. Finally, we were brand new to Airbnb. We were so green, had never run an Airbnb before.
But that wasn't even the scariest part. I was really worried about what it was going to be like to have total strangers staying on our property while we were living there. I mean, we'd both heard a lot of horror stories about Airbnb guests. So we wondered, were they going to be loud? Were they going to throw loud parties? Were they going to trash the place? Were we going to get calls at 2 o'clock in the morning to come and fix the toilet? Were they going to leave bad reviews? We just had no idea what was going to happen. We were about to find out if this was going to be a great idea or a big mistake. So we listed the property in mid-December 2021, as we said, and then we just waited. That's such a feeling, like when you hit that button to publish and then you just wait. But fortunately, we didn't have to wait very long because we got our first booking within 24 hours. Somebody wanted to stay the weekend. We did a happy dance. And within 48 hours, we got our second booking, and that booking was for a month. So that was an even bigger happy dance. And we were really wrong about people not wanting to come to the beach in winter in New England because we were booked almost the entire year that year. We had about a 70% occupancy rate, but we did block off a lot of dates for friends and family, for renovations that we needed to do, and also times where we were traveling. So we were really surprised, happily surprised by the results.
Yeah, and we were also a little bit concerned about what it was like to manage the Airbnb because we had heard it was difficult and challenging and took a lot of time and lots of wear and tear on the property and lots of care required. And maybe that's true for some people, but for us, it really wasn't. I mean, we spent about 2 to 3 hours a week managing this property. We had a cleaner who cleaned it, but we did the laundry, and we also managed all the guest communications. But there were some things that we did that saved us a lot of time. We used a self-check-in process using an Igloo lockbox so that we didn't have to be available when the guest was coming in or leaving. That was great. In order to coordinate with the cleaner, we used an app called Turno. That worked out perfectly. We used Price Labs to set our pricing dynamically and automatically, which was great. And while we did guest messages all manually at first, we ended up automating a lot of those guest messages through the Airbnb app. Airbnb app. So it was really just laundry and responding to questions that was taking up any time. And by the way, we'll leave links for all of these products that we used in the description below. But managing our own Airbnb that year didn't take a lot of time at all.
So the other thing that was a lot easier than we expected was actually the process of hosting guests. As I said earlier, I was really concerned about what this was going to look like, having people on the property while we were there. But we just have had the nicest, most considerate guests, and it's really been such a great experience. We have had, for a while, we had some guests that, we've never had a bad guest, let me say that. We did have some guests that were a little bit more challenging, but we looked at that and we figured out that tended to be people who booked same day. I don't know if that's true across all Airbnbs, but it was true for us. So we stopped taking same day bookings, and then we no longer had that problem. But we've had just a phenomenal experience with guests at the property.
That's right. And our guests left great reviews, and it allowed us to make Superhost status on Airbnb the first quarter that we were eligible. And we've remained Superhosts ever since. So now we get to the big question, how much did we make? And let's get into it. So we listed the property, the upstairs unit, on December 15th of 2021. And for those final 2 weeks of December, we made more than zero. We made $2,259. So that was a surprise to us.
It was a great start.
And so now let's quickly run through the months of 2022. So in January, we made a little bit more than $1,000. In February, $3,100. March was $1,100. April, almost $2,600. May was more than $4,100. June was $4,700. July and August both were a little over $6,400 a month. September was almost $4,100. October, $3,500. November was nearly $1,100 because we blocked off most of that month because we were doing renovations in the lower unit at that time, and we also blocked off some days for Thanksgiving. And then December was right around $3,000. So the grand total for 2022 was almost $41,300. And if you put in the little 2-week stub of 2021, that $2,250, by this point, by the end of 2022, in those 12 and a half months, we had made $43,553, and we were thrilled. Now, remember, these are only gross revenue numbers, so all the expenses need to come out of there: mortgage and insurance, property taxes, and utilities and supplies and all that other stuff. But we were really happy with these numbers.
Yeah, remember, we thought we were just going to get a couple thousand extra dollars in the summertime, and we were still self-managing the property at this time. So even with all of the expenses that Matt mentioned, we were still profitable. So I would say that that first year, the numbers absolutely exceeded even our most ambitious projections. But things were about to change.
Yeah, so as we rolled into the second full year, 2023, there were some big changes. First, there were some changes in the market itself. By now, we had more competition. So within the general area, so 5 or 6 miles, within 5 or 6 miles of our property, the number of similar rental units went up by 53% from 2022 to 2023. So a lot more people. And our area was included in a list of the hottest markets for Airbnb investors in 2023. So while we look like geniuses, even though we weren't when we bought the house, it also meant that there were more investors and more competition. So even though within Airbnb and short-term rental, overall bookings were up in this general area because there were more properties competing for that, there were a lot of individual owners who saw bookings go down for their property.
Yeah, so there were changes in the market, but we actually had some pretty big changes personally as well. This was the year that we decided to move to Portugal, and we moved in October of 2023. That meant that we needed to hire a property manager, and for the first time, we'd be renting out both units.
So even with all these changes, we managed to earn more in the second year. Now, we rented the top unit, the mother-in-law unit, for all 12 months, and then we also added the lower unit for about 2.5 months at the end of 2023. And we ended up with total revenue of $53,124.
So even though our gross revenue went up, we were now paying a property manager, so our expenses also went up quite a bit. If you'd like to see a video about the income and expenses for this Airbnb, let us know in the comments, and we'll do a video later on. But our expenses did go up, but that was nothing compared to the hit that we were about to take.
That's right.
So by this time, we were renting out both units, and at the beginning of the year, we had to replace our property manager. Now, we knew nothing about hiring property managers for short-term rentals when we started. We learned a lot. We learned the hard way. We learned the expensive way. Fortunately, everything is good now. We've got a great team in place, but we're actually going to save that story for another video because we really learned a lot, and we wish we would have known some of these things before we hired a property manager.
Well, experience is a great teacher, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it was also the first time our property was not profitable for a few months at a time. Now, this was kind of a big deal to us because now that we were not living in that property, we needed the revenue of that property from both the top and the bottom unit combined to cover its own expenses. And it wasn't in some of those months, in which meant we had to dig into our own pocket and cover those expenses. Now, part of it, there's two reasons. Part of it was it felt like everything broke at once. I mean, we had to pay for repairs and replacements. We had to get a new washer and dryer, a new refrigerator. We had to repair a water heater. We had a bird that got into a place where it didn't need to be, and we needed to get that out of there. And in order to make all of these changes, we had to block off dates so that guests couldn't stay there. In some instances, we had to issue partial refunds for guests who were affected by some of these things. It was an expensive beginning to 2024, that's for sure. But then second, we had fewer bookings in 2024 than we did in a similar time frame in 2023. Now, some of this was due to dates that we blocked off for repairs, and some of it was downtime due to the transition from property manager A to property manager B. But some of it we thought was market related, because now comparing 2022 to now 2024, we now had twice as many competitors in our area as when we first launched.
So as we are recording this, we are halfway through 2024. So here's where we are for year to date. Completed bookings in 2024 so far total $18,762.88. We also have bookings that have been reserved but have not yet been completed within 2024, and that total is $18,883.07. So that brings us to a total year to date for realized and unrealized revenue of $37,645.95. Now, we project somewhere between $75,000 and $80,000 this year. Of course, we know absolutely anything can happen, but that's our goal based on where we are right now. So how much have we made in gross revenue total since we launched this Airbnb 2.5 years ago? Well, as we mentioned, in the last 2 weeks of 2021, we brought in $2,259. In 2022, we brought in $41,294. In 2023, $53,124, and so far year to date in 2024, realized and unrealized is $37,645. So the grand total, and Matt is going to fact check this in editing, but I believe the grand total is $134,323. But it gets better because we've also gained about $100,000 in equity. So that's a total of $234,323. So Matt, how do you feel about those numbers?
I feel really good about those numbers. I mean, remember that at least getting into the Airbnb, we had an initial investment of $18,000, and we didn't know if that was wasted money or not. Of course, there was money to buy the house, but really to get into the Airbnb business, the incremental cost was $18,000. And then as we made money off of that Airbnb, the upstairs unit, we took that profit and we reinvested it into renovation of the outdoor space, put in a patio, leveled the yard, some other landscaping thing. We put in some renovations in the downstairs unit. And yeah, there were expenses, of course, in addition, like the mortgage and the property taxes we talked about before. And there were a few months where we lost money. But overall, we've been very happy with the return.
Yeah, the process has also been just a lot of fun. Like the renovating and design process was really fun for one of us. And we have really enjoyed hosting guests as well. And in fact, we've loved this experience so much that when we decided to move to Portugal, we decided that we wanted a similar property. So we bought a property that also we live in the main floor and we rent out the upstairs. But we would find out that running an Airbnb in another country is a whole different story and a whole different video. So be sure to subscribe if you want to hear more about that. And if you want to watch our video about house hunting in Portugal, you can watch this next video. Thanks for watching.